Chapter 1 Getting Started. The difference between Yate Tamago and me. When I was growing up, I loved manga, and eventually I decided I wanted to create it too. As my friends began to praise my work, drawing became more and more fun, and I started to think that I wanted to make manga for a living, to become a mangaka. At the time, the only way for me to break into the industry was to win a competition in a shonen manga magazine, typically monthly or weekly periodicals that ran manga, often serialized, targeted for a young male audience. Each year, when summer vacation came, I drew and submitted a new piece, but at best I saw my name among the finalists, never the winner, and of course I never received any feedback from the editorial board. The year I turned 16, a mangaka duo who went under the pen name Yode Tamago made their professional debut with Ultimate Muscle. They were the same age as me, and that news gave me a jolt. I was at the age where I had to start thinking seriously about my future, and seeing their success made me go from thinking I want to become a mangaka to I will become a mangaka. I began to give real thought towards why all my efforts were leading to rejections and what made me different from Yate Tamago. Returned to the envelope unread. Although my rejected submissions had been lost to time, I know I tried to make them as special as I could. But thinking back on them now, I believe they failed because they were too unoriginal and they were missing that something that could catch the editor's eyes. My drawing style imitated that of the manga I loved called Babel 2 by Mitsiteru Yokoyama, only mine wasn't good. To an editor who had to read dozens of submissions every day, mine must have evoked feelings of tedium from the very start. Oh, another of these. When I entered the profession, a great many editors were the severe type, and that might be true to this day. They were not at all of the opinion that they should avoid saying anything that could harm a novice mangaka's pride, or that they should tread lightly so as not to harm a newcomer's feelings. Rather, the editors treated the novices as the professionals they aspired to be and presented them with unsparing criticisms. But it was because of them that I went from drawing only what I want to draw to realizing the path I needed to take. When I first started making manga, my greatest fear was presenting a new work to the editorial team and having the editor practically slide it out of the envelope, then return it without even turning the second page. It was all too common for an editor to see the very first panel and judge the work to be not good and not worthy of reading any further. I worried that if that happened to me, it might be a blow from which I could never return. Rejecting a work without even reading it may seem unnecessarily harsh, but these editors see a huge volume of submissions and have developed the ability to tell what the rest of the manga will be like from the first page alone. Just as readers may look at a manga's cover and decide that all they need to see. Even mangakas who had already made it into the profession could have their submissions rejected at the very first page and would leave their meetings in tears. Witnessing that kind of sight while waiting for your own turn to go in and show your submissions will impress upon you the importance of creating a grasping first page. In a sense, the very life or death of manga will depend upon the first page. Make them turn the first page. Alright, so the first page is important, but how should you create it? Many elements can go into the first page: the drawings, the titles, the protagonist's dialogue, and so on. But if the sum of the elements is something that feels unoriginal, something that someone else has already done, then neither the editor nor the reader will turn the second page. Avoiding such an outcome is the first step. That said, no one is going to come out and hand you a neat answer. How I found the solution was through systematically analyzing the first pages of popular manga. Since every mangaka took special care of their first pages, I could study those leading pages to see what the creators were trying to achieve and the effects of their techniques, and use that knowledge to bring my own work alive. One word of warning: studying best-selling publications is critical to finding what elements sell, but you mustn't simply copy those works. That goes doubly as a newcomer who may not yet possess the drawing techniques to make a copy that reaches the same quality as the original. No matter how popular the example manga is, you mustn't jump straight to the easy answer of simply mimicking the style and expecting your copy to sell. The idea is to gain a foundation of knowledge upon which you can search your own creation. Creating the first page, Part 1. What to draw. When looking at the art itself, you might find certain elements that provides appeal, such as the following: pretty art, unusual art, creepy art, clear lines, bright art, or pleasant and airy, sexy art, art portraying light, stylish art, purposeful expert art, or art made as simple as possible, art that has never been seen before, photorealistic art, comedic art, art with few motion lines, art featuring only women, art featuring only children, art featuring only stones and rocks, and many others. By making a list like this, you can find elements to create a first page that readers will continue past. The next step is to figure out what drawings you will make for them. Selecting the style for your first page requires the utmost care. Creating the first page, Part 2. Find a compelling title. The same applies for the title. If you look at Go Nagai's titles, for example, like Shuten Doji and Barai the Kid, many of them involve wordplay. His puns coupled with his unique style to draw in readers. Make a list of titles of some popular manga. Think about which ones might inspire readers to turn the next page based on title alone. and then think about what kind of titles you'd want to use. You need not restrict titles to manga alone. Including hit movies and novel titles may also be of help. I'll include a short list of titles that comes to mind. For any of you who haven't read or watched, feel free to think about which pique your interest and what makes them good titles. Suzy-san, The Wonderful World of Suzy-san, Jurassic Park, Kami no Suke, Paper Moon, Chibi Muraiko-chan, Bleach, One Piece, Sakigaki Agoko Oju, Change, Men's School, Death Note, Naruto, and many others. Jurassic Park is a wonderful title that encapsulates vivid imagery, and Paper Moon leaves a striking impression. The use of the single kanji for sakigeki is enough to clue in the potential reader that the manga will be about delinquents from the Yankee subculture, and the additional of man school hammers the image home. Together, it is a prime example of a title that conveys the content of the manga at a single look. Personally, I've always taken a liking to titles that include the main character's name, like Suzy-san or Chibi Mariko-chan, even over cooler titles. Titles like that convey to me the impression that the author cares for their main characters. Because of this, I often include characters' names in my titles, such as Mashonen BT or Cool Shock BT, Bao Rehosha or Bao the Visitor, and Kashibe Rohan Wao Ugago no Konai, or Thus Spoke Rohan Kishibe. With Cool Shock BT, which became my first serialized manga, I put a lot of craft into the title to make sure the editors would take my submission out of its envelope. First, I used the word Mashonen, Devil Boy, to catch the reader's attention. Then, I used the initials BT instead of a name to allude to the way news reports refer to underage criminals in ways such as Boy A, thereby creating an air of mystery and crime, so that the reader would recognize from the title alone that the manga belongs to the suspense genre. I also include the main character's name in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, but I could as well have gone with something like Akira's Mysterious Adventure or Andy's Splendid Journeys. But because the main character was a foreigner, and therefore something unfamiliar, I wanted to use a memorable nickname for the title. Then, by using the word bizarre, the readers would understand that at least something about the world of the story would be unusual. For the last part of the title, I tested out different words before deciding on adventure. Creating the first page, Part 3. What makes good dialogues? Now, make a list of what kind of dialogue would make you want to read on to the next page. I'll provide some examples. Shocking dialogue, mellow or calming dialogue, confronting dialogue, sad dialogue, angry dialogue, joking dialogue, dialects, dialogue with haikus, 575, dialogue with rhythm, think rap, and many more. These are certainly not the only effective type of dialogue for a first page. Look at the dialogue on many mangas' front pages and think about why they make you want to read further. When you think you have a feeling for it, use that foundation to find your home run opening lines. When it comes time to draw your first page, you must do so purposefully and only after thinking through every detail based on your own analysis of successful works, from the art to the title to the dialogue, in order to capture the attention of your editors and your readers, and to make them turn that first page. The beginning is far too important to draw without care. The 5 W's and 1 H, the foundation of the first panel. When I began making manga as a hobby, I drew my first pages without giving them much thought. But as I continued analyzing other works, I began to understand the fundamentals of the first panel. At the most basic level, the first panel should illustrate the 5 W's and 1 H. In other words, who is doing what, and when, and where, and why, and how. As a natural result of establishing the main character's location and the time at which the scene takes place, the first panel will likely be somewhat large and often a depiction of the hero with buildings in the background. If you follow that pattern too closely, you will end up with a too familiar panel at a too familiar size, even if you do manage to check off the basic 5W 1H requirements. Since you mustn't draw the same thing as other artists, you need to find something uniquely yours to capture the reader's attention. It was from this line of thinking that I began devoting conscious efforts to devising ways of throwing in curveballs without abandoning the fundamentals. Since I enjoy suspense stories with mysteries to solve, I decided to apply these techniques in my manga. For example, I could start with a panel that leads the reader to question where the main character is, then gradually pull back the viewpoint to reveal his lockup in a hospital. As with the other elements of the first page, so too must you come up with a solution for the 5 W's and 1 H. That is a little bit different than manga that has come before, and in doing so invites the reader's attention. Offer many pieces of information simultaneously. The next skill I worked to acquire was how to serve many goals in a single drawing. Let me give a single line of dialogue as an example. I think I'll make pasta today. From that sentence, I can communicate a range of information about this character to the reader. The character likes Italian food. The character does their own cooking. The character likely lives alone and not with a family or significant other. The character does not live in utter poverty. This dialogue can work in conjunction with the character's hairstyle and clothing to convey much of the protagonist's circumstances and personality in a single glance. Drawing a unique kitchen as the background would instantly tell the reader that something was different about this character. The same applies to the cover image as well. In the cover page for my first chapter of my first manga, Cool Shock BT, the image was also used for my graphic novel, I drew a bust of the main character, BT, and I also included several mechanisms to capture the reader's intentions. The series of black and white arrows establish a recurring design. The shadow of a hand falling on his head suggests mystery and suspense. The colors and shapes of the background present a modernistic feel, and the squirrel perched on his shoulder symbolizes friendship. In this manner, a single drawing and a single line of dialogue can communicate the main character's personality and circumstances while leaving a strong impression on the reader within one panel. Manga's unique strength is the ability to express in a single image what a novel might expand many pages on. This is an important point to keep in mind. A manga's first page is its preview. I always draw a manga's first page in a way that serves as a preview of the pages to come. For example, if I were to make a manga about a war, I could depict an emotional scene with a soldier and their family, or possibly establish that the theme is anti-war, or even simply start with a battle scene. Readers want to quickly grasp what kind of manga it is that they're reading, where the manga is ahead, in other words. And if too many panels go by without them being clued in, they'll decide they've had enough to read. I like to answer the 5W and 1H in the first panel, and in the second presents the main character doing something a little unusual to suggest that my manga is not like other manga. Communicating directly and dynamically to the readers what they're about to read requires great skill, but it must be done in order to make them want to keep reading. To illustrate using my previous example of the man who in panel 1 said, "I think I'll make pasta tonight," I could draw the second panel to show him saying, "I guess I'll go to the wheat field," and heading for the door. The reader, presented with this surprise, would think, wait, he's not starting by boiling the pasta, but instead going to harvest the raw ingredients and then making it by hand? This guy might be interesting. The reader will naturally want to turn to the next following page to find out what this clearly unconventional character will do next. The opening of the first JoJo manga also serves as a preview for the manga to come, partly because I wanted to try my hand at an adventure manga for Shonen Jump. I decided not to start with the main character's introduction, but with a prologue scene involving the stone mask and Aztecan treasure. But even though I unscrewed the standard rule for how a manga should open, I made sure to communicate the mood of legends and ancient oddities. I wanted the reader to know that the stone mask and its power would drive story forward. Seize unclaimed territory. As a result of studying popular manga and analyzing what I had been doing wrong, I was able to make my professional debut with Botsu Poker, or Poker Under Arms. Shonen Jump selected the story as a second place winner. First place was not awarded at all that year for their Tezuka Award for Up-and-Coming Mangakas in 1980. I had finally taken my first step into the world of professional manga creators. When I set out to make Poker Under Arms, my first thought was that in order to get the editors to read my work, I needed to claim territory no other artist was drawing. To that end, I chose to make a Western. I've always loved Western and stories in desert settings. I had been captivated by bald twos, uniformed schoolboys going alone into the desert. The image of the main character strives to be the best he could be. Amid the vast and lonesome desert was a beautiful sight, and I thought it was cool. It resented with the image of the great Clint Eastwood riding his horse across the wilderness and drifting on to the next town. At that time, the only other shonen manga in a Western setting was Koya no Shonen Uzamu, or Uzum Go into the Wild West, a manga drawn by Noboru Kawasaki about the child of a Japanese man and a Native American woman. Because of this, I thought it could utilize a Western setting to stand out from my peers. Poker Under Arms. Draw your first page like this. Now, let's look at how I drew the first page of my first published manga, Poker Under Arms. But first, let me back up and start with the title page. The straightforward approach to a manga's cover or title page is to draw the main character, but Poker Under Arm was to be an atypical manga, a Western, and one involving a card game battle. Instead of the customary main character, I came up with a composition where the largest element was the legs of a man with a face hidden, who had been shot and was falling over backwards. I put the faces of the two poker-playing gunmen on the playing cards on either side. I figured that the other applicants would draw their characters looking cool or with attractive women, and I purposefully did something different for my attempt at the Otsuka Award. I also chose a title that would evoke an image of violence and gaming. As for that all-important first page, I scattered several non-standard elements throughout. Where the main character should typically appear, I instead brought forth a narrator, who is revealed as the culprit at the end of the tale. He is a middle-aged, well-built, and wearing a suit, and he says, "This is a tale of two gunmen." And it is a true story, witnessed by my own eyes. Starting with a narrator, as with Watson in the Sherlock Holmes series, it is an incredible, effective technique in suspense stories. The Western background in my first panel is there to prove part of the typical 5W1H. Standing in frame is the narrator, for some reason standing alone while drinking wine beside a picnic table. My intention was to present a mystery to the reader. Why is this man drinking wine there? Who is this man anyway? Meanwhile, I slowly pulled back the perspective from a close-up to a long shot for a cinematic feel. The main character first appears where the story begins, on the second page. I needed to quickly establish what kind of character the gunman was. To do so, I came up with a scene in a barbershop where an enemy attacks the main character mid-shave. I made the main character a villain with a high bounty on his head, whose life is in constant danger from bounty hunters. I thought that by showing him taking care of his appearance at the barbershop, even amidst such peril, that I would create a tough guy image for the character. At the same time, by showing someone get killed within such an everyday scenario, I hope to impress upon the reader that this was not a typical place. How to make them read to the end. My primary goal with Poker Under Arms was to get the editors to read my work to the last page. I drew each panel deliberately so that each served a clear purpose and no single image remained that could be removed. But I focus most of my efforts on the opening pages. I made sure to include all the required elements, the fundamental 5 W's and 1 H, and individuality on my own, achieving multiple goals in the same drawing, and offer a preview of the coming pages. It was the best work I'd produce up to that point, and polished to a level that would challenge any editor to find flaw within it. I made my professional debut with Poker Under Arms, but that didn't mean I wasn't immediately transformed into a proper mangaka. Rather, the perspective of the Shonen Jump editors was more like, well, we'll give him a shot. To them, I only arrived at the starting point. Over the next several years, as I searched for the next step, I created stacks and stacks of rough panel layouts. I think about 500 pages were rejected, but through this learning process, I eventually came to understand what elements a manga needs to make the editors and readers keep reading to the very end. I call them the 4 major fundamentals of manga structure. They serve as my guideposts to create a manga of the Royal Road, and I'll explain them in the next chapter. Hello everyone, I hope you enjoyed another chapter from Mangas in Practice and Theory. This one was, it took a bit longer to make, being that, I'm always busy. I always try to, get things done, and sadly, making these YouTube videos do take time out of, most of the things I got to get done. But I'm glad that I finally am able to post this. Again, if you like this, please like, comment, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. I am really enjoying making an audio chapter book based off of, or not based off of, but reading the book so that everyone can have a chance to, enjoy and all that kind of stuff about the book. I hope you enjoy and have a great day.